Hello, this is just a potted history or talk of roughly postcard size free motion stitching. So if you really dislike tracing an image with a pencil or whatever tool of your choice, you can actually photocopy and then iron on the transfer, then just stitch around the lines if you really dislike tracing. So obviously the simplest option, I'm not sure how well this shows up, is to just trace with a pencil on top of an image. It's probably simpler with a light box, but a window or a window is fine. But that image was quite dark, so I didn't need either really. If you wanted to add colour, you can colour with fabric pens, probably Sharpie markers. There's lots of Inktense pencils, all of those. Or you can trace the shapes and draw them onto Bondaweb, and then you could add a fabric skirt just to enhance the image that way. And I will sew this out in a minute. I've just ironed on small scraps of Bondaweb and then roughly drawn a little vase or jug and a couple of seed heads. So I shall free motion some stems in a moment. So that's a nice simple way for that. So that's that one. We then did colouring with an Inktense pencil. There we go, yeah. So you do need, rather than using water, which will bleed out totally, if you use something like a medium or aloe vera, I'll leave that there, that activates the colour, and then you heat set, and that's good to go. That's ready. That's actually washable then. So what I've also done is stamped some foliage, and even though these are sort of rushes, or I suppose it could be wheat even, using VersaFine, I've stamped sort of the illusion of trees and foliage at the bottom. And with the VersaFine, again, when you heat set, that makes it washable. I wouldn't necessarily put it in a 40 wash in the washing machine, but certainly if you wanted to rinse through, or perfect for art quilts, or just making simple card images as we've done here. So that's Inktense. Then another technique was using, let me see if I can get this, isopropanol alcohol. So you can get this from the chemist or online. I think I bought this online. Just put it in a small spritzer, and literally when you've coloured with the Sharpie marker pens, I used a plastic lid from a box, so you just literally scribble, then spritz, leave. And now I left this probably 10 maybe 15 minutes, and it actually bleeds through. I'd put tiny red dots with sort of a poppy field in mind, so I'm not really sure whether I like that or not. But on this side I've just used some fabric markers. Again, I've heat set and just roughly sketched trees, which I shall free motion a little bit later. So I've just sort of given myself areas that I want to stitch into. So that's a possible. That may even stay the back. What I did after the 15 minutes, if you just leave it, it will eventually take the dye out altogether. So I just ran it under the cold tap to stop the just to stall the activation, and I've left it to dry, and I've heat set this morning, and that's washable now. As I say, that side might get used, or that side. I haven't made my mind up yet. So that's Sharpie pens. It's a nice, now it could be that you wanted that as some sort of, if you were doing an art quilt or a wall hanging, you might just want a certain colour or effect, like a mottled sky, and you only needed just a few centimetres or inches just to infill. This is an excellent way of just creating a little bit of fabric without all the rigmarole of dyeing fabric. So that's that. Now, we also did collage. So again, very simple. A few bits of leftover bits of lace, ribbons. That's sort of a satin bias binding. It's just little pieces that were left over. And then I just picked out a selection of light coloured fabrics. Wasn't particularly anything in mind, so I just random fabrics. Had seen a few seed heads stitched on cards on Pinterest, I'm going to say. So I literally just scribbled my version of the poppy seed head and some stems with little buds on. Now, if it really mattered, you could draw these with a pencil, but I basically foliage across the bottom and then a few lines and a circle at the top, then just give them a little that little petal that's underneath. I've added a couple of buttons there, just partly to add interest, but actually to hide a couple of bits that I didn't like. So there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I had some very pale sky blue, which again, I could have made that with the Sharpie marker pens. If that was what I wanted, I could have made that. It's different white, so that's a bright white, that's more of an antique white. And don't forget, if you want a colour, so that's the fabric the right way up, and that's the same fabric, but I've actually turned it over and used the wrong side of the fabric because I just wanted it a little bit more subdued. I didn't want the bright grey, I wanted a hint of grey. So I've just covered some of the edges with lace and a little bit of zigzag. And if you've got nice stitches on your machine, just use the nice stitches. You probably don't need the lace. Just have a little play with some of the stitches you have. So that's everything. I'm going to go to pause now, and then we'll stitch a few of these pieces that are left to be finished. Thank you. So we'll start now with the Heat and Bond vase. So I'm just going to start across the rim of the jug. Just take your time, don't be afraid to just pause and realign yourself, or even just turn the fabric round if that makes it easier. Don't try to overstretch yourself like so. I'll try to go around twice. This will just go onto a card, so we're not going to worry too much about that. So now I need to come up to this, and again, I'm not worried about coming across the front of the vase. I think it's allowed. So go round and round. I know it should be odd numbers, but I feel like that's probably enough in there. So now I'm going to come back. I'm going to just give it sort of a long leaf petal. And another one. And then, so I'm above the vase now. So I'm just going to move along, I think. Maybe 1 or 2 stitches just to align here. But again, I do want a curve. I don't want it to just be straight up, but just a gentle curve. So because I'm not working in a hoop, what I've actually got below this fabric is 3 layers of tearaway, but it is a good quality tearaway, so it's actually quite sturdy. So there shouldn't really be any pucker. I've actually used sewing needles to pin, simply because I just don't want the head to get in the way. I don't think the head would get in the way of the needle, but it just might get in the way of your fingers. But I would say just be careful. You could catch yourself on them. But I don't think I'm sewing fast enough to do any real damage. It'd just be a little bit of an irritation. There we go. Might make this one a little bit thicker at the top, perhaps. Just to make it look like this. There we go. Probably better. Again, up and down. Leaves down a little bit further. Let's have another leaf. A little bit more foliage just to fill the space and add a little bit more interest. So I'm just going to move along this vase. Then, so we can go curved quite round. And just scoop up. Again, it's not critical that we go right to the edge of this fabric's heat set, so the Bonder web should hold it quite well. There we go. So we've got nice. Oh, I think that's 5 in there, so that's a bit better. And then we'll just make that stem a little bit thicker again at the top. That's a leaf there. And we'll give it a longer leaf to the outside. There we go. Now what I want to do is just, because at the moment it's floating mid-air, so I think we can afford to just give it a tabletop or something. So we'll just just going to stitch for a few stitches. There we go. So just basically that's that. So that's that. So I probably now, what I shall do is get the ruler and roughly draw a pencil line for a frame, and then I shall frame this. I will just go to pause while I get a ruler. I'm just going to stitch a couple of lines along this frame, but having said that, if I have an aperture card large enough for this to fit in, then I shall just pop it in an aperture card. Okay, so you don't like that. Oh, right, so the thread, I'm going to assume the thread has run out, so I shall just go back to pause. Right, there you go. It's worth checking to see whether there's any thread left in the bobbin, but there we go. We're not a problem. Can all be dealt with. There we go. There we go. It's not. It is a little bit tricky doing it this way, but if it was in a if I had a larger piece of fabric, it would be in a hoop. But this mat is on its last legs, so the mat is annoying. We shall replace that. It's not a problem. Let's cut these last threads. I'll go through a second time. So yeah, I've just been using this gripper, but because I need to hold this up to just skip over the aperture on this slider mat, because it started to disintegrate. It's catching. There we go. You can see it jump now. It'd probably be okay for larger projects, but for small projects like this, it probably should have been in a hoop, just to avoid its catching like that. There we go. So that's really nice and simple. That's not. I shall cut away. I shall trim this all down, tidy it all up, and then, as I say, if I have an aperture large enough, that will go into an aperture card. So that's that one. So now we'll have a look at the birds. I'm not going to get too fussy about these birds, because I'll try to do just a couple of stay stitch. I don't want too many, because it's quite I only want quite a small bird. I don't want it to be a big lumpy one. So there we go. Try to just gently move. Now again, because just a few stay stitch, not running any loose threads in, none of that. So again, I shall start with a few stay stitch, because I have 2 layers of fabric and the wadding or batting, whatever you want to call it. It's quite sturdy, this. So again, I'm not, for the amount of stitching I'm going to do, I'm not expecting a great deal of puckering. So this again is not, I'm not using any tear away or backing up. I don't want to have to peel anything off. So there we go. So just a few stay stitches to start with. Again, this is just postcard size, and it's a few stay stitches at the end. Pull the thread out. There we go. I don't know why I drew this many birds, but there we go. Just probably to prove that I can do a bird if I really want to. They tend to look like falcons or eagles. That's not very delicate usually, but we'll see. It's basically a curvy V. Not too bad. It fills the sky anyway. It was a bit of a void before. Sure, see how they'll, once I've trimmed all the threads away. we'll decide whether we're going to give up on birds or not. Now those trees, I could actually use a zigzag, and there is a zigzag option on my free motion, so we might just give those a little go. I'm going to stay with black on this one, but on the other one I might use a coloured thread. Just see where we get to with that. So we'll clear this up. There we go. That's okay. There we go. That one's on the way. So I'm just going to roughly a little, I think I'm going to do the foliage this way. I shall see whether it starts puckering or not, and then decide whether I want to do the foliage side to side. Right, I don't know whether I want to do that, because it looks like it wants to take it under. Now you would normally use a single whole plate for this, but I've deliberately used the zigzag plate because I wanted to try the zigzag, but again I think because I'm so near the edge I should have just gone for the single needle plate just for this. But I shan't stitch right to the edge because that's all going to be behind a frame anyway. Whether it goes in a little picture frame or on a card, I'm not really sure. They won't be sitting round as, they won't be just sitting round as samples or any of that type of thing, because you just don't have space to keep all this sort of thing. So it's just a case of finish it and move it on. So if I can make a birthday card or something, I'm quite happy. That's that. So trim that. Okay, so let's see where I'm going to just try the zigzag at the right, okay, so we need to just change the foot to do this, which is fairly simple. So this is the free motion. Well, it's what the machine tells me I need to use for the zigzag, so that's what we shall use. Again, I might be quite near the edge for doing this, but we shall give it a go. So to lift the needle and then go back to straight stitch. I'm just going to take it down a couple of stitches for the tree trunk and put there we go. Not sure about that, but we'll see about the next one, see if we go a little bit slower. If so I'm going to start with the tree trunk, just a few stay stitch, now move up. I'm going to bring the needle up, go back to the zigzag, just going to make it smaller. Yeah, I suppose the thing is, as long as they're all a little bit different, that's what really matters, isn't it? So there we go, we'll do one more. thread. So I think I'm going to change and just do, I'm just going to try a straight stitch. Could have changed back to the other foot, but I don't think it matters too much. If anything, this probably holds everything down a bit cleaner. Basically just back and two, just filling the space, but not going too wide, and hopefully getting a point at the top of the tree. Yeah, so I think I prefer those actually, but anyway, we've given the zigzag a go. Not so keen on that, but that's fine. So we'll give these, they're probably a little bit more windswept across this side of the hill. So I'm not going to bother cutting threads, or I'll cut these, or I'll trim these threads all off at the end when I've finished. And the beauty of having it printed, you don't have to cover the whole of the print. You're just sort of embellishing the outline. And these are a little bit thicker, and they've got a little bit more of a curve on them. So just back and two, back and two. So the tree on the other one that will colour, the actual foliage will probably do tiny little circles over the leaves on the tree, but for the impression of the leaves on the tree. So I'm just pulling the thread back, not doing anything special. Just pull it back out of the way. Come back in where you think the next one should be. Do stay stitch. Oh, didn't like that. Let's pull that one out. It doesn't like that. Right, okay, that's fine. Just clear everything off. Start again. There we go. Take some of this off the back. Again, we're not being too fussy. Nobody's going to see this back. Just make sure nothing's catching. There we go. It's all off. Now then, just start here and see if I can find out what that's. I probably just tried to move it too quickly and it didn't like it. So we'll go back. There we go. To the top of the trees. I suppose, I'm not sure if I would put a sentiment on this. I haven't decided whether I would do that or not. Could perhaps glue some beads or sequins if you wanted to bring it up a little bit. Depends on who you were sending to it, I guess. Oh, don't like that. I suppose it's getting a little bit thick under there. There we go, just gently back and two, back and two. Almost there. Right, there we go. Last one. That's it. So I could always add some glitter or one of the Cosmic Shimmer pastes just to make the water a little shiny, or even onto the sunshine give a bit that of glitter, just to zhuzh it up a little bit. So we'll trim those last bits and we'll call that one done. So there we go. Not worried about any of these little tufty bits on here, because that'll just add to the illusion of the foliage, so that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to mark myself down for that, and we're not going to worry about the back. As long as there's no threads near the edge to hang over, that's all really we're looking for. And again, this will be trimmed because we want to trim those bits off. We will square it up a little bit more just with the ruler and the rotocutter. So that's that one done. I'm done with that one. I'm just going to go back to pause and have a look for some coloured cotton for the last unit. Right, so I've changed to brown, and we'll see what we can do with these trees. I'm just going to start there, just a few straight lines. Oh dear, no, that doesn't like that at all. Right, that's fine. We shall just rethread the bobbin and see why that didn't like that. Cover back on. There we go. So let's see whether that's a little bit happier now. I'm just going to hold on to that. Right. So straight down that curve. There we go. Just wanted to rethread. Why it does that, I've no idea, but this happens. So I'm just going to turn that around. Even though I'm going to add the leaves with the green, I'm going to still have some branches that may or may not show through. Fill that little bit. There we go. So cut the thread. Get rid of all of that. Oh, it's not too bad at the back either, so always bear in mind at the back you may end up preferring the back, so that's, again, we're not too worried. So just come on down to this next tree. So obviously these are in the distance, so the trees that we have in the foreground will be a little slightly thicker. So turn that round, give them some branches. Branches would cross anyway. I'm just going to pull away, not take it back and under. Down. And again, because this is all laid up, that cotton has, I think it's just going to be simpler to cut the thread each time, because for some reason it doesn't seem to like being pulled across. Sometimes you can get away with that, and then others, for whatever reason it doesn't like it, but that's not a problem. We shall just cut the thread at each junction. So let's clear that away in the bin. There we go. No, I don't use a needle threader, just don't know. I find with the lighting on this machine I don't really have that much problem threading up, so I'm just going to try to go a little bit slower, because I think sometimes I go a little bit too fast on these little hidden parts that I think don't matter so much, but then the thread can't quite keep up, so I'll just slow down. On my machine, when I'm free motion sewing, I actually take the setting, the speed setting, to medium, because I find I can't move the fabric as quickly as I would need to move it if I was stitching at full speed. So all you get is teeny tiny little stitches, which is what I'm getting at the moment because I'm deliberately sewing slow. But I literally wouldn't have any other options if I had it on high speed. So again, give it some branches. Come along. Don't worry about them being big loopy ones, because these are going to be behind the foliage. We just want the illusion that the branches are there. There we go. One more up on the hill. There we go. Probably the nearest to a summer holiday this year. Seeing all the windswept trees in Cornwall or somewhere like that. But we'll get over it, I'm sure. We'll get by. Now we'll come down to the thicker trees. So again, these are in the foreground, so these will be a lot thicker. So I've got the roots coming out. Quite old trees, so they'll have quite long exposed roots. There we go, so it's not quite so windy down here. Sound a bit like Bob with his painting, won't it? So it's sort of shaded now, so the trees are not quite as windswept. So the leaves should be more of a halo on the top of the tree. Okay, let's get this tree trunk. You don't really want dead straight lines, because you would have curves and knots and holes in the trees for the birds to nest in, or it's not just one solid piece. There we go. Last one, and this is when you wonder why you've drawn so many. So here we go. Some roots. Turn round, last lot of branches. Oh no, I didn't like that. Now this is if you were in a hoop, you obviously wouldn't get it pulling at the edge like that, but we're not in a hoop, so just trim those. Right, so there we've got the suggestion of some trees. I'm going to just go to pause while I change to a green cotton. That's really rather boring changing. Let's see what we can do with these tree tops. So I've used sort of slightly lighter shade of green for the distance. So I'm just going small circles just around that space. It's looping a little bit, so whether that's because I'm going too slow. So we'll see if we can speed it up a little bit now. So it probably looks like I'm pulling this fabric more than I am. I'm just trying to keep it not necessarily tension, but just keeping it as flat as it probably would be in the hoop without, I'm not physically pulling it through the machine. I'm still gently moving it round. So I didn't want to go right the way around in one big circle. So I'm just basically just roughly skipping back and two in that space. And we'll come back to the next tree, and again just without interfering with the movement, just try to hold the base fairly. I suppose taut would be too strong a word, but I'm just trying to get away without too much pucker. Oop. That doesn't look too bad. And again, I don't mind those lines staying there. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. So I just use my hands to give it the tension it would have had in the hoop. To alter the texture by just speeding it up a little bit. Although I feel like I'm doing tiny loops, they don't actually show up as tiny loops. I think that could be just the way that I'm set up is affecting the thread. The way that the camera is attached to the arm onto the machine, it's all a bit Heath Robinson, I'm afraid, but I don't want to move it anymore because at the moment it's sort of stayed in position reasonably well, so I'd rather not interfere with it. Take that thread off, take that thread away. Yeah, just clear some of this background. There are lots of pieces with these automatic cutters. They do leave a lot of debris behind. Right, so there we go. I think, yes, this thread's getting caught somewhere. I can see the tension on it. I can't actually see where it... Oh, I see, right, okay. Right, 1 minute, if I can just get rid of that. Right, hopefully that's... Yes, yeah, I think I found where that was getting stuck. So if we come... go. I'm trying to do small circles, but they don't come out as they're quite jumpy really. But again, if I was in a hoop, I probably would have more control. So that's nobody's fault apart from me being in a rush. The thing about quilting or laying the fabric with the 2 layers of fabric and the wadding or batting, when you add the Sharpie pen, the inks bleed through, so you have a choice of 2 sides. So if I only use one piece of fabric, I think I'd have to be really careful, because it would bleed through so quickly, and then I would only have one option at the end, whereas there's still a reverse of this. So I had the choice. So now I'm going to change to a slightly darker, I would say nearer to a forest green really. I don't have no idea how long I've had some of these cottons, but it really is about time they got used. I'll change this one. Just put it on pause. Okay, last leg. I'm just slowly doing some circles. Again, because this is a foreground, we'll just try to make it a little bit thicker. And there we go. So that now, I mean, you can see now why it was worth or creating the branches, because it just gives it some depth. I think you'd feel like you needed to add more foliage if you hadn't actually stitched in the branches. I think you'd feel like you had to totally cover that area, whereas this way you can stitch slightly less, I think. It just still gives the impression of yeah, it's not so keen on going round in circles, but we're almost there now, so we'll just carry on for the time being. There we go. Come on. There we go. That we've got. Let's just bring it out at the top a little bit more. Let's get rid of that end. There we go. Take that one away. To get caught up with any stray stragglers. There we go. Come down the trunk of the tree, because the leaves do come down quite low. Right, that should do there. And then we'll do the last big one, and then we'll call that quits. I would say there's probably a little bit of pucker on this one, but again, we're not worrying too much. It was more about the technique of colouring, and would I necessarily use it for this? I don't know, but I certainly would use this colouring, finding this mottled effect for fabric. It could be really useful, but I think this one probably calls for being stitched onto a small frame or, you know, a small canvas. So that you could stretch it. I think it'd stand being stretched. Is that frayed again? Is it the thread fraying now? Oh, no, 1 minute. Let me just take. There we go. I think that's just got itself a bit twisted. Right, okay. There we go. That thread somehow twisted itself. I've no idea how it managed to do that, but it did. Not to worry. Here we go. So of course it's a Saturday, so I'm not sure if that's cutting the grass or drilling or some odd job. There we go. This thread, that's probably why I haven't used this thread. Might be fine for hand sewing, but I'm not sure. I think it is. It may even be a 40 weight. It's a little bit thicker probably, but it's what we've got and this is what we're using. Probably would have been better getting a machine embroidery thread. That probably would have been a bit more forgiving. But we've started and we shall finish. Yeah, as I say, if we stretch this across a piece of card, or, you know, something like a grey board, or even just a tiny little canvas, the flat ones, they're not necessarily the stretch canvas, but the small boards that you buy for art projects. That probably would work just as well. Oh, I'm going to get fed up with this thread very soon. Okay, so now I know why I haven't used them. Let's see if we can get just a little bit more around this side of the tree before I really get fed up with it. There we go. Come on, just fill it all in. Just take your time. There we go, circles on circles. I'm probably going to fray again. Yeah. Okay. There we go, we're almost finished. Just a few more. And then we'll give up on this thread. Alright, that thread. We shall have a look at the weight of that thread in a moment, because that's been quite annoying. Right, let's have a look. Well, it says it's 50 weight, so that shouldn't have been. Yeah, that's we shall assign that one to hand sewing, I think. So that's that. So possibly do a few French knots for the poppies there. Yes, it is puckered, but I think you could stretch that over a canvas if you really wanted to. Could even glitter that up again so that the water's coming through, bit of shimmer. But anyway, this was more about dyeing the fabric, having some options to dye the fabric. So that's the reverse. Yeah, that's trees in the sky, so we can't have those. But that would be a nice sky fabric if I wanted a sky. And again, that as a mottled background, that worked really well. So it's a useful technique for small, useful snippets of, right, I mean, you don't even need to buy yourself a fat quarter. Then you can just literally colour the exact amount of fabric that's required. I would say probably a nice quality cotton, perhaps a Egyptian cotton. That probably would take it very well. But as soon as you see it's sort of bled out enough into the desired effect, just take it and run it in under the tap, just cold water, just to stop it going any further, because otherwise when you come back to it the next morning, it's almost bleached itself. Not completely white again, but it will have taken most of that out. So once you've decided it's gone far enough, rinse it. When it's dried, heat set it with the iron, and then you're good to go. That's washable. And thank you very much. That's the end of the postcard size stitched stitched cards. So there's that. There's those. I have to say that's probably my favourite. And there we are. Hope some of that might have been of use. And again, if it doesn't work out first time, you're only working on your scraps, because that is literally all this is tiny scraps. They were so small, those pieces. There was nothing I could put them in apart from confetti. So it's marvellous to be able to use them up. I mean, look at the size of these pieces. You possibly would put them in the bin and give up on them, but what a pretty little card for somebody. Anyway, enjoy. Bye.